Welcome to yet another episode of RCS Trailblazer podcast. In our last few editions, we have seen how to build your infrastructure for your business messaging. We have seen how partnerships mean value and add importance when you want to do a business messaging communication. In today's podcast, we're going to see how actually on-ground business messaging operations actually work, how it adds value to enterprises, and what is the expectations that enterprises should have from probably a partner or probably an operator. And to dive deep into today's conversation, I have with me Girish who is the Chief Business Officer for Netcore and who has spent enormous time in this industry. Welcome Girish to the podcast. Thank you for taking out time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's a great pleasure.
So Girish, with that, I straight away jump into my first question. Netcore has been an institution which is present for so long. It has been a part of the complete evolution journey. It has seen all the changes that has come across in the industry. What do you think has been the most challenging aspect of business for Netcore, or probably something which was very obvious in the hindsight?
I think this is a great question. Let me tell you, we started as a messaging company, eventually evolved into the entire CPaaS stack, right? Within some channels like email, we had market dominance of about 70%. Now, moving from that or, pivoting from that business was a very, very big decision. One usual, wisdom would say that, you are market dominant in one channel, invest in that channel, right? And it's also about, skill sets. You have to basically add more skill sets. So it was a very, very difficult decision, but we wanted to come closer to the decision making, right? And which is why we moved from, the messaging business to the MarTech stack. The second thing that when I reflect back, is the right thing that we did is that we evolved from a MarTech stack to a CDP, right? Which means that today, with all the messaging channel that we have today, we are collecting a lot of data signals and we are basically bringing it all together for a marketer. Now, we're giving a unified view to the customer. Now, what do you do with that data? You got so much of data. Now, data without actionable decisioning is actually of little use, right? So, CDP with an engagement tool on top of it is the right move, and I think we are directionally going there.
Okay. So there are so many layers that Netcore has within itself, right? Like I said, it has been a part of the evolution since beginning. So you've got MarTech layer, you've got an communication channel layer, you've got agentic AI layer now that comes in, you have a CDP layer. How much of importance is it to probably a last mile enterprise customer to have a full stack partner with them?
So Nikhil, as I would say that it's very important, the marketers has to basically look at it very differently. It is not about, one would have one vendor or one service provider for all channels or all services. It is about, stitching all context about one customer. Now that's the most important thing, right? Now, let me give you an example, right? How do you basically bring, consistency in your communication? Which means that, let's say you're basically getting a WhatsApp messages, I'm going on a website and I'm getting an email. It should not have disjointed experiences, right? It should feel like a seamless, conversation with the consumer, right? Now, when you basically work with different partners, I think they all work with different data sets, and that is where the disjointed services are. So that is one breakage point, right? So if you would probably ask me, having one single vendor, which is on a unified data stack, actually minimizes that. The second thing is, by having multiple partners, is also creating more frictions, right? Let's say tomorrow, and this is something that not too many partners talk about, if something breaks, then who do you basically hold, right? Because there's so many partners eventually getting together to basically deliver an act. So having one partner also basically ensures that, you have one partner to basically look forward for.
So now, this is more complex than we would have expected, or, a lot of enterprises would have predicted. Let's talk a little on channels now. Earlier there were very traditional channels like email and SMS. Now we have seen the OTT channels come up. Where do you think RCS as a part of the OTT channel fits into the entire business communication play?
See, today what is happening is most marketers are basically doing mass broadcast. So it's basically reaching out to everyone with a broadcast rather than having a communication or conversation with the segment of one. So what we do is, from a lens of a marketing stack, is that we enable the conversation to a segment of one. I think that's a big move. What happens is, many times you miss some most obvious signals, right? So let's say, a brand is sending a message for a renewal to me without even realizing that I've already renewed the policy because I'm a part of the, broadcast. Now that's a big miss. They don't even know, what channel I'm engaging with, what language do I prefer. Now, when you do such kind of, communication, you will naturally see the response getting dropped. Versus the fact that when you probably have an agentic play, I would probably say that the agents would probably read from the data, call center data, that what is my preferred language, what channel am I engaging with, how closer I am towards my policy renewal, and basis those signals are basically giving a contextual message based on the channel that I prefer, will naturally drive a better response.
Okay. Let's go a little more deeper for our audience. Netcore has been working in this space across various industry clients, be it BFSI, retail, e-commerce, and all. Why don't you tell us a little more on how the adoption has been across industry? Which is the industry which has adopted RCS fastest and maybe is being consuming it the highest? And it will be great if you could share some use cases for our audience.
I think there are a couple of industries which are basically adopting well to this, and I think the answer is very obvious. These are the verticals where you need to communicate rich, right? Where you want to build engagement with the customers. So because by virtue of carrying rich media services within RCS and ability to interact with customers, the natural verticals are verticals like e-commerce, retail, travel, BFSI. So these are the natural verticals. Obviously, within these verticals, the use cases could be different. So, BFSI could be more about lead generation and service-oriented messages. E-commerce could be the entire, stack of, discovery to picking the product in the cart and doing the transaction. So building that entire ecosystem without the messaging. Yeah, so use cases could be different, but these are the verticals which have been the early adopters to the channel. When you basically, create a journey, it is basically based on some predictable aspect, right? For example, I would probably run a campaign. If the user responds in a particular way, this is how you should basically respond back to the user. If he does it other way, then there's other. So that's how the journeys are created. Now, the agents have a very different way. Agents come into play when the user is responding in an unpredictable behavior. And I'll give you an example, right? For example, one of our D2C, large D2C brand, now they saw a user coming back and clicking on a particular product 5 times. Now, naturally, if there is a journey, the journey would say that there is a user who's interested in a particular product and would probably certainly give a discount coupon because he's come back to you 5 times and had not done a transaction. So you would certainly give a discount, right? But the agentic aspects comes and reads the data, right? Much more micro than how a journey would read it. And it would see that, Girish is coming to the site and is basically looking for a particular, size in a particular color, which I'm not able to find, and will actually, guide me for an alternative to that product, right? Now that's the difference, right? So that's the difference between a usual journey and the agentic play. So agentic has a very, very significant play. It can be contextually relevant. It can also drive better sales outcomes.
So when we talk about AI combined with MarTech automations, so today there is conversations, journeys, and automation. All these are pretty heavy words, right? Yeah. From a CMO's perspective, if today they have to take a decision, which of these three adds long-term value to their enterprise, or probably which one of this is just meant for operational efficiency or for it to be a good to have kind of a feature?
I would basically put it this way. These are 3 buckets, right? So when you look at automation, it is basically auto response. So for example, I'm doing an online transaction, I'm getting an OTP. Now that's automation, right? I am basically going to a website, filling a lead form, I'm getting a thank you message. That's basically automation, right? Journeys are basically again unpredictable behavior. So if I'm signing up for a brand, designing a campaign and nudging the user to do the first transaction within 30 days is sort of journeys, right? Again, predictable behavior. Now, the third is basically where the users are non-predictable, conversational, right? Now, when a user is coming, but is not going through the usual behavior and is basically, responding to a brand in an, unexpected way, and still you get a response back from the brand, that's conversational. In my view, automation will drive efficiency. The other one would probably drive conversation. So journeys can basically, help you convert a customer. But if you build conversations, that's where you build brand. Because that's where you're basically getting the prospect, the customers closer to the brand. So if you want to build brand, then conversations are the right way to build.
So while automations, conversations, they all play a part. But still, like I mentioned, the adoption is pretty low, or rather I'll say it's pretty slow. Probably people are still thinking, how can they consume this channel, or how can they utilize it better in their business communication? If I ask you, if you compare RCS to an SMS today, what would be your answer in terms of features or in terms of advantages?
See, I would say both have their own role to play, right? There is a role that SMS has to play. There is a role that RCS has to play. So if the purpose is basically just notifying the user about a particular transaction, SMS is a very, very strong role to play there, and it will continue to play. But the minute you're talking about giving more exposure about your brand, carrying risk messages, if you want to give him more option to explore, right? If you want to basically build engagement, then RCS plays a very important role. And I think, a brand or a marketer has to basically understand this difference what is the purpose of your campaign? And basis that you have to pick the channel.
So let's say, our audience got excited and they got motivated about moving to RCS tomorrow. What would be your advice in terms of how does an onboarding journey look like if they have to migrate to RCS from SMS? What steps do they have to take?
I would say that, the journey is far more easier compared to SMS. SMS is a far more regulated ecosystem. There is DLT, there are regulators. So it's a far more regulated thing. I'm not saying that RCS is not regulated, it's self-regulated. But in a, relative context, RCS is a fairly easy, walkthrough.
Okay, so the use cases have to be well defined, the intent of the journey has to be well defined, and then probably choose the channel from which you want to.
Absolutely, and it is usually in context of totality, comparative totality, right? Not just in isolation.
Now, because Netcore is a global organization, I want to ask this question to you. There are different behaviors we see across regions. Probably India is part of the region which is very heavy on messaging. Probably there are a few other regions globally as well who are like India. What is your learning from other regions, or what do you recommend, that probably an enterprise in one region can pick up as a best practice from some other enterprise in some other region?
So, see, Nikhil, we are globally there, almost in every continent, probably having offices in about 18 countries. In my lens, it's a blend of, when you're looking at cost efficiency and scale and, reliability of a channel, then India is the market, right? That is how Indians look at it. When you look at the Western markets, European markets, I think about data protection, privacy, those aspects becomes very, very important. And when you look at some of the Southeast Asian markets, some of the Middle East and UAE markets, GCC markets, I think the conversational aspects of messaging becomes a very important play. If you pick the signals, I think you can blend a very, very nice, messaging strategy in overall, right?
Yeah, because a lot of times what happens is we have seen case studies which are published probably on a Google site or probably on Netcore site, which are global in nature. So sometimes an enterprise in India might think that how can this actually be useful for me, or is this really applicable for me or not? So this actually solves a lot of doubts that they might have in their mind. Okay, jumping to my next question is all this CrossFit play that is present in every region.
Basis this, we basically, pick and choose, because eventually everybody is offering services, right? Within the gamut of, every operator coming into the play, who do you choose? So I think these are the lens that we pick when we pick an operator.
While we spoke so much about the ecosystem, the business messaging as a channel, the infrastructure that is required, what role each one of us plays, let me ask you a personal question for our audience to learn from it. What is the best piece of professional advice that you have received in your career so far?
I think it's a great question, Nikhil. I would say that, one of the biggest advice that I've got from a senior, and this is my personal experience, is that sticking to your values. I think ethics and being disciplined is the biggest advice that I've ever got, and this is also the values that Netcore believe in. So being people-centric, putting customer centricity first, and, being disciplined and ethical. I think these are perhaps the best advices that I've got from my, seniors, and this is the values that I also carry over time.
On that note, thank you so much, Girish, for taking out time and coming here today. It means a lot for us and our listeners.
Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you for inviting us. I think it's a fabulous discussion and it's a great initiative that you're taking.
Thank you, Girish. And for our audience, thank you so much for tuning in today. We will be coming out with more such episodes to ensure that your business communications are strengthened and made better for you. Stay tuned in till next episode. Have a nice day.